My name is Tiff, and with me today is Vani. Welcome to this session. We're going to talk about developing custom extensions for operations dashboard for ArcGIS. So let me get started by doing a quick survey. So how many of you have never used dashboard before? Can you please raise your hand? Okay, we got this side, never used dashboard before. So people over here, you've used dashboard before, I assume? Have you developed extensions or add-ins before with dashboard? No? Okay, that's good. So we've got a mix of audience here, so hopefully after this session, everyone will get something useful that will be helpful to your job when you go back next week. Oh, by the way, we also got Patrick, who also works in our team, and he will help answer some tough questions. Okay, so let's quickly talk about the agenda today. First of all, I'll give an overview about Operations Dashboard, the application itself. So for those of you who've never used the app, it will be a good starting point for you to get some idea about what the app is for. For those of you who've used the dashboard before, just take it as a quick refresh for yourself. And then we'll jump right into talking about extending Operations Dashboard. After that, Vani is going to give us 3 demos. After the demos, I'm going to talk about deploying dashboard extensions into the production environment. And finally, we'll cover the roadmap, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So overview of Operations Dashboard. So Ops Dashboard is a visualization tool for making decisions. It's also used very widely for monitoring real-time events. So as an example, I have a screenshot at the top of the screen that shows Boston Marathon, and dashboard was used in that event to keep track of the runners, where they are in that area and where the police vehicles are, ambulances, first aid stations, and assets like that. So the app is used to keep track of the situation in the marathon. Dashboard is also used to visualize key performance indicators. So as an example, the app is used by a lot of oil and gas companies in a way that they might have a whole bunch of oil wells in the field. So they use dashboard to keep track of the temperature and pressure and other attributes of the oil wells in the field. So dashboard comes with 2 flavors. It has a Windows platform that you can install and run on a Windows machine, and you use the Windows machine to create content. It also comes with a companion browser application that you can use to open the content created by the Windows dashboard on the browser. So for example, if your end users, they like to use iPad or maybe an Android device, then they can open the content created by the Windows dashboard on their tablet device. So talking about the Windows app, a lot of people will ask, what's the license? Is it free? Actually, the Windows app and also browser app, they are free. So you can just download them from your ArcGIS Online organization or portal organization. Right, so this is just a quick overview about the app. So now let's talk about the content that gets created by the Operations Dashboard. So we call this content the operation views. And there are 2 kinds of users here. One is the author of an operation view. So these are the bunch of people with the privilege to create content, update, and delete content in the org. So they will also be the people to create to create operation views, configure them, and then build a very focused operation view for the end users. So then the other group of users are those who interact with the operation views and components inside. So what are the components of an operation view? There are a few kinds of key components of each operation views. And again, you can see some examples on the screenshot of the slides. So the first key component of an operation view is widgets. So widgets, they are visualization, or think of it as information display. So they can be a map. So you see a big map widget on the center of each operation view. Usually surrounded by a whole bunch of infographics or charts like bar chart, pie chart, histogram, things like that. You can also put some descriptive text on it to describe what this operation view is for. So first type is widget. Second type of key components is called map tools. So if you look at each of the map widget, at the top there's a toolbar with a bunch of tools that you can use to interact with the map. So to give you an example, you can put a bunch of bookmarks on your map so it can help you navigate to different places on your map. The third kind of components in dashboard is called feature action. So they are little action that you can execute on individual features. So to give you an example, you see there's a list widget on the up view at the bottom. So on the list, it shows all the features, one item for each feature. So if you want to know where exactly that feature is on the map, you can pick that feature from the list and then run a highlight feature action, and that will highlight that same feature on the map. So widgets, map tools, feature action, these are the three kinds of key components of each operation view. And they're very important for you to understand them because you will be also writing your extension and making it a widget, map tool, or a feature action. So we provide a whole bunch of built-in or out-of-the-box components for you that you can configure them to build a very focused operational picture for your own situation. So there's one more key component to each operation view, and that's, of course, your data. So talking about data, it can be a hosted feature surface that's hosted in your ArcGIS Online organization. It can also be a feature surface on your ArcGIS server. It can also be a dynamic map surface. But regardless, you bring this data into a web map, and then from this web map, you bring it into dashboard. And now we call this data feature layers. So there are some layers you don't want to use them to power your widgets. You just want them to be reference layers. But for those layers that you want to use to power the widgets, you make them data sources. So, so once you have a data source, you can create a widget off of that data source. So let's take that list widget as an example. So you can create a list widget to consume a whole set of, let's say, fire trucks features from your feature layer. So from that list that shows all the fire trucks, the story doesn't stop there. Actually, you can also select a subset of features from that list and use that subset to become another data source for other widgets. So as an example, like a details widget that you can show the details of each individual fire truck feature that you select from the list. So now you see the concept of like a chain of data sources from your feature layer to your entire data source, and then you select a bunch of features that you're more interested in and use it to drive other widgets. Something I did not show on this slide is the concept of selection data source. So the idea is that you can, from the map, you can select some features that you want to look into more closely and use that selection to power the widgets that you want to create, like a gauge or a chart, things like that. In Ops Dashboard, you can have refresh interval on your layer. So let's say you have, again, the fire truck features. The backend data, maybe they get updated every 6 seconds. So you want to make sure that you have that refresh interval carry over in your operation view so that your features will be updated every 6 seconds. And the change will be reflected on the map as well as on all the widgets. Okay, so this is a quick overview about the app, components, all the built-in stuff. So now let's talk about extending dashboard with custom functionality. So when we talk about extending dashboard or dashboard extension, what it actually is that it can be a widget extension, a map tool extension, or a feature action extension. And it's actually a web app, maybe a simple web application that you host on your web server. And then you just run this web app in the operation view. So just like many web application, it has a manifest. So a manifest will be a JSON file that describes the attribute or properties or behavior of your extension. It also contains an HTML file and optionally some JavaScript file that contains the business logic, CSS, and other resources or external library that you need to use. You build an extension with the ArcGIS API for JavaScript on top of in addition to any other libraries that you want to use. And just like the built-in components, you can make your extensions configurable by the user so that it can be more focused on your operational picture. The other cool thing about extension is that once you finish building one extension, it can run on both the Windows app and the browser app pretty seamlessly. So to give you some examples about what kind of extensions you can build like a weather information widget that shows you the latest weather update for your current map area. So when you change the map extent, it just fetches the latest weather information from some external API and show me that information. You can also build a buffer map tool that, for example, if you click a point on the map, that calculates a buffer area that maybe in case of evacuation, you know how big the area you need to evacuate. A third example is like a feature action, export to CSV feature action. So you can pick on a feature from your favorite list widget and then export those attributes into a CSV file so that you can do further update. And actually, all these examples that I just mentioned, you can find them from our GitHub repository as some samples, and I'll show you the link in a second. Okay, so again, if you can't see the text, please come closer. This is a very important slide. It describes the life cycle of an extension. I would say if there's one thing you remember from this session, please remember this slide. So we'll start by talking about the orange box. And actually, when we talk about the life cycle of an extension, there are a lot of different kinds of users that will be involved. There are developers and web admin and the ArcGIS org admin and the people who create the dashboard and use the dashboard. And we'll describe, and I'll talk about each of those in a minute. So let's start from the orange box. So at the beginning of a development life cycle, so the dev team will go out and collect requirements, and then the developers will start coding. So this is at step number 1, the developers will start writing the extension. So as developers, we all know that it's very important to be able to debug and test our code when we do the coding. So the dashboard team provides a special way for you to run the app or to start the app. And that's called the dev mode or the development mode. So with dev mode, there's two characteristics. So first is that when you start the app in dev mode, you can, it comes with something called the debug tool. If you have used the Chromium debugger before, like the dev console that comes with Chrome, it's the exact same user experience, same tool that you can use to debug your extensions on the fly. And Vani will show us how to use the debug tool in her demo. So this is number 1. And number 2, second thing about the dev mode is when you use your extension, again, it's a web app. But during the time of the development, you might not have a web server readily available. So when you start the app in dev mode, it actually can run the extension in localhost. So you don't have to have an actual web server in order to start testing your stuff. So that's the first part, the orange box. So once the whole development cycle is completed and the extension is ready to go to production environment, so the developer is going to hand over the extension to the web admin person. So we are now at step number 2. So the web admin guy is going to take that extension and host it on the company's web server. So now it becomes a web app, comes with a URL, and then the web admin is going to send that URL to the ArcGIS organization admin. It can be a portal org or ArcGIS online org. But regardless, the org admin is going to take that URL and register that as an item in the organization. And I'll show a demo at the end of the session. So the admin is going to take that URL, register an extension item in the org, and just like any other items that gets created in the org, the admin will share that extension item with the person who creates the operation view, and that goes to step number 4, and that is the publisher or the person who creates the operation view. So that guy is going to package all the widgets and information in addition to the widgets, custom extensions into an operation view. And finally, once the view is built, then the publisher will share that operation view with the extensions to the end user so that it can be used. So that completes the whole life cycle. Okay, so now you got a good understanding about the life cycle of an extension. Vani is going to give us the first demo, and she'll talk about how to start the app in dev mode, and she'll show us a table widget. So to you, Vani.
Thank you, Tiff. So we are going to look at 3 demos today about the 3 most important components of operations dashboard, like Tiff mentioned: a custom extension widget, a custom map tool, and a custom feature action. But before we start looking into the actual demos, the first step is to set up the development environment, because we are developing our own code. So 2 important things to note here is to set the development environment and make sure the files are hosted on a web server. Let me show you how that happens. Let's start dashboard in normal mode on Windows. Once the application opens, open the task manager, right click on operations dashboard and click on open file location. This will take us to where the exe is located. Right click on operations dashboard and create a shortcut. Again, click on the shortcut, right click, open the properties window. So basically we are telling the application to open in debug mode, meaning you should be able to debug, and also it needs to pull all your custom extensions from the folder where you have hosted on the web server. In my case, I have the custom extensions locally on this folder on C Dev Summit 2017, and I have configured my IIS to treat these as web applications. So the next step is to add the extdbg parameter to the properties.
Can you all see the text?
So you see the target box right after the exe. You copy paste the location where you have your local extensions, prepended with the parameter extdbg. Click on apply. Okay. Now this is the shortcut which you will be using to open the dashboard in dev mode. I have already copied it to my desktop. You can copy it to any convenient location. Let's close the normal dashboard. You will see this dev mode, when your dashboard opens in dev mode. So we know dashboard is used for monitoring real-time data and decision making. Assume we are law enforcement officers that are responsible for looking at the road conditions in Toronto. And so this is the data we have from the services. These are all the default widgets that come with a dashboard application. Now we are going to go and add our first custom extension. It is a custom widget. So tools, edit operation view, add widget. So this will pull the custom extensions I have in the specified folder in the properties window. So you will notice the red box around the custom extensions window. This is a way to differentiate it. The custom, which is locally hosted on your own web server. If it is registered on ArcGIS Online org, you will not see this red box. So I'm going to select this, click OK. Now I'm going to hook this widget to a data source. And I'm picking road incident selection. Tiff mentioned about selection data source. So you will see an example how that works right now. So you don't see any data in the table because I have hooked it up to a selection data source. Let's go and select one of the features. So this brings the information, the attributes for the feature I have clicked. So this is how you add a custom extension widget. I'm going to save this. We all know you can view an operations view on a web browser too. When you add custom extensions too, you can do the same. To do that, you click on dev mode and you do open in browser. So we see the custom extension added here, and we see the same results. Let's take a quick look at the code. First, let's take a look at the left, the file structure. So the most important file in this is the JSON file. This is also known as the manifest file. This basically contains the properties that decides the behavior of the extension. So there are three different types of properties. One is general, we have the runtime and the configuration properties. The general properties define what kind of an extension it is going to be. The type is the most important of all. You'll have to specify if it is a widget or a map tool or a feature action. These are the three supported type extensions, and it is case sensitive. There are some optional properties like title and description. And one of the important properties to note here is the use data from view, meaning if you noticed when I added the custom widget, I picked a data source. So I need to specify use data from view to true if I'm going to consume a data source. And this runtime contains the path to the file that will open as an extension during runtime. And this is a configuration property, meaning I'm setting this required data source to true. Only then I will see the drop down to pick the data source for my widget. So the next is the HTML file. This is basically what is rendered as a web app on your operation view. So we follow the Dojo style. So we declare our custom extension as a Dojo digit or a widget. So that's what we specify here in the data Dojo type. We set the default properties using the Dojo config. So here we set the extension path and we set async as true. It is very important to specify the Dojo config before the JavaScript API CDN. If not, it will not work because the configuration need to be set before we open the CDN. And once this is for parsing the DOM elements. So this scans basically the DOM and parses the elements when they are ready for us. This template.html contains the actual UI. So we are using a dgrid to display our data in the table. That's what you see here. And this is another important file. This is where our business logic is. So we follow the AMD style of coding. So we have declared all the required modules and referenced them here. Basically, all Dojo widgets, they inherit a base class known as widget base and extend a mixin called templated mixin. This is basically to render the UI. So there are several lifecycle methods for a Dojo widget like constructor, post create, and destroy. You can override all of those methods. When we add our custom extension to the operations dashboard, basically a communication needs to be established between our web app and the operations view. Once that is successful, we offer a function or we trigger an event called host ready through our API, only after which you can manipulate and do your own customization of the code. So once the host is ready, that means the communication has been successfully established. We set our business logic in here. So I have a memory store to store the data. And we hooked up the widget to a data source, but we cannot access the data source straight. So we offer something called as data source proxy through our API, which basically gives you an instance of the data source. That is what is this. And this is I'm initializing my dgrid. And I'm also setting up a query to query the attributes I need. This is another important function to note. The data source expired. This gets triggered 3 times in the life cycle of an operation view. When the initialization happens, or when you pan or zoom your map, that is basically when the extent of the map changes, or if you have a refresh interval, meaning the dashboard is for monitoring live data. So we have a refresh, you can set up a refresh interval where the data can be refreshed at 5 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, so you will get the data. So those are the 3 times the data source expired will get triggered. And the most important function we use, or the most common function we use, is the execute query. So this gives us the results, and then we update the table title and the data in the table. So going back to the view, so we open the view in a dev mode basically to debug. So you can enter the debug mode in 2 different ways. One is, if you notice here, there is a small triangle button. I'm not sure if it's clear. You can either click on the triangle or click on dev mode and say open debug tool. So I can click on this, go to the source. This is basically like you are using a Chrome debugger. I can set a breakpoint here, and I can pan or zoom the map. It's paused in my debugger. And you can make changes to your code. Say, for example, I'm entering a console log doc. So I can just basically refresh this to see the code change. You see the console log statement here. But if you're going to make a change to the JSON file, the manifest file, then you have to basically remove and add the extension. So this is the first demo, and over to you, Tiff.
Thank you. So thanks, Vani. Okay, let's do a quick recap about what we just saw in the first demo. So in this demo, Vani showed us how to create a custom widget extension. So once again, an extension consists of a manifest file, which is a JSON file, an HTML5 file, and optionally a JavaScript file that describes the business logic, CSS files, and other resources like images or thumbnails. So the manifest contains properties that drive the behavior of an extension. For example, the title, the name of the extension, whether it's a widget, map tool, feature action, whether it uses the data from your operation view or not. It's all driven, it's all described in that manifest file. So some key concepts that Vani talked about when she showed the code. So a widget or a extension is like a Dojo digit. So basically, it has a bunch of life cycle methods. So you start from a constructor to post create function, and then it comes to the host ready function. That's something that we provide in the API, and that will be called when the application, the dashboard, and your extension are ready to work together, and that's where you have access to most of the properties that you need. After that, you start calling your business logic and do the stuff that you need for your operation view. Vani also talked about the data source expired method. So this method is usually used when you want to execute query. So what I meant is when a data source expired happens, you want to re-execute a query against the data source to get the latest information from the data or from the surface. And Vani also mentioned about the 3 situations that data source expired will be triggered. So first is after host ready is called, that's when the relationship between the app, dashboard, and extension has established. Second situation is when someone changed the map extent. That's when we know that, hey, data source expired. We need to fetch the data again by running execute query. The third situation is when data source refresh happens. So let's take that example that every 6 seconds, I want to see the latest information about my fire trucks. So every 6 seconds, the data source will be refreshed, and then data source expired will be called, and then I can go and do an execute query to get the latest information about my layer. And Vani also showed us how to start the app in dev mode. And she also showed us how to use the debug tool for debugging the code, putting breakpoints, stepping through the code, or even changing the source code and see it on the fly. So if you make a change to your extension during the development mode, there are two situations. One is you make changes to the JS file, CSS, or the HTML file, basically anything other than your manifest. If you make a change and you want to get the update, it's very simple. You just have to hit the refresh button on the debug tool, or if you're using a browser, just hit the refresh button on the browser, then you get the latest change. However, if you make a change to the manifest file, then for the Windows application, you just need to remove that custom extension, add it back again, or you just have to close the app, start it again in order to see the change from the manifest. For the browser app, again, very simple. Just hit the refresh button or F5 it, and then you get the latest change. Okay, so now in the second demo, Vani is going to show us another kind of extension, and that's a map tool. So back to you, Vani.
Thank you, Tiff. So this time we are going to look at a custom map tool. So now I'm also, as an officer, as a law enforcement officer, I'm interested in looking at the snow conditions, the road conditions, driving conditions, and I want to take a look at the snow. So we are going to use this map tool to do that. So if you notice in this map tool, you see the red box and you see a settings button. This map tool has an additional part to the code, which is called as the configuration part. When we added the map widget, we use the default configuration and we pick the data source. Here we are going to set the configuration. So I'm going to say I need to look at the snow conditions, and the radius is 15 miles. Say for example 30 days. You see the map tool here in the toolbar. Let's click on it. So it's saying I can click on the map. This creates a buffer and pulls all the images, all the pictures. So you see one big highlighted icon here that points to the location you see on the picture. So if I move the pictures, you will see the icon moving along with it. So a quick look at the source code of this is the change in the JSON would be you would specify an additional part to the configuration, which is the path to the configuration file. And in the list of files, you will see two additional files. One is the configuration template, which is the UI of the configuration, and the business logic in the configuration, which is the config.js. So this is the UI where we enter the date and the radius. And this is the configuration part. An important thing to note here is you can set a property at configuration time and retrieve it at runtime. Here also basically we follow the AMD style of coding, like the runtime configuration. So if you notice here, there is something called this.config. You can set any properties to the this.config object, and this will be persisted and rendered to you at runtime. For instance, I'm setting the search text based on the value I enter in the text box. So once I enter, then I set a property called ready to persist config as true, which means it will save this search text in the config object and I can use it at runtime. So this is my runtime.js file. I can retrieve it straight, this.search text. And that's it. Over to you, Tiff.
Thank you. Okay, cool. So in the second demo, we look at a map tool extension. So this is another extensible point that you can build extensions on, and to give you extra functionality that you can interact with the map widget. So Vani showed us how to build an extension that's configurable. So just like any other built-in widgets or map tool, you can build an extension that can be configured by the end users. And to do that, you implement the UI and also the business logic to capture and to validate all those configurations. So you might be wondering where do those configurations, where are they saved basically? So actually all these configurations that you capture from the UI, they will be saved into part of the operation view. So an operation view is essentially a bunch of JSON data. So all the settings or configurations that you have from your extensions will be saved, will be serialized, and then saved with the JSON data in the view. So Vani also talked about how to capture a property in a config time. So to do that, it's very simple. We provide an object called the this.config. So you just have to pass your property into the this.config object, give it a value. And in runtime, you want to retrieve that property. And to do that, there are two scenarios. One is if you are developing a map tool and a widget, just like what Vani just showed us. To retrieve that property, you just call this dot, then the property name, and then it will give you back the property that you saved. However, if you are writing a feature action extension, then the way to retrieve it is you do a event properties.config and then property names. So event properties is what you get when you execute that feature action. So there's a slight difference here between how you retrieve the properties in runtime for different kinds of extensions. All right, so now let's jump into the third demo where Vani is going to show us a custom feature action that she'll use to export attributes into CSV file. So back to you, Vani.
Thanks again, Tiff. So this time we are going to add a custom feature action. So again, we know it's a custom with a red box around, and this is a configuration part too. Here I'm going to, for example, I want to save the data or the attributes of the road incidents for future references or archive those. I can pick the attributes that I'm interested in. I'm interested in all of them right now, so I'm checking all. Okay. Okay. So okay, let's click. In the Windows version of the dashboard, you will do a right click for the feature action. So let's click on Export CSV. This will open an Excel sheet with the attributes we picked and the values, and we can save this. Let's see how the same thing works on a browser. I have added couple extensions after the first demo. We looked at the browsers. If I refresh, it should pick up all the extensions now. So we have the map tool. We should have the feature action. So the difference is in a browser version, it actually downloads the CSV. You can open the CSV, it's pretty much the same. A quick look at the export CSV source code. So the JSON, we specify the type as feature action here. We also have a configuration part. So the difference would be the way in which you save the property at configuration time. Here there is something called event properties. So you save the config as this.config.selected field names. When you retrieve it at runtime, you will retrieve it as part of the event properties here. So when you execute the feature action, you get an instance of the event properties, and you access the config object using event properties.config.whatever property you set at configuration time. That's the only difference in retrieving the config property between the map tool and the custom widget as opposed to the feature action. And that's it from me. Over to you, Tiff.
Thanks. Okay. Oops. Okay, so it was a quick demo. So just one thing to recap, and that is the fact that you can retrieve the properties that you saved to the config in runtime using the event properties object. So through that, you can get your properties and then use it to run the feature action. So now we have looked at all these kinds of extensible points and an example for each of those. So now let's talk a little bit about deployment. So when we look at the roadmap again, although it's pretty small, but you still have an idea that we've now moved from the orange box to the blue box, where we can start talking about deploying the extension to your web server and the production environment. So I'll first walk you through all the detailed stuff, and then I'll do a quick demo about how to deploy an extension in your organization. So there are a couple steps here in deployment. So first is you have to host your extension to a web server. This might be done by developers, or might be done by the web admin person, or other people involved in this process. There are a couple of things you want to make sure that your web server has, there are a couple of requirements that you want to make sure that your web server has met. So first is you want to make sure that your web server has HTTPS enabled with a valid certificate. This is particularly important if your ArcGIS organization enforces HTTPS. So you want to make sure that your web server also support that in order not to create like a mixed content kind of problem. In addition to that, you want to enable the cross-origin resource sharing in your web server, because that's when your user use the extension, you want to allow your ArcGIS organization to have access to your web server. So you want to make sure that your ArcGIS org is a trusted domain in your web server. Thirdly, you want to make sure that if you are going to register your extensions in ArcGIS online organization, you want to make sure that your extensions are anonymously accessible from the web server. This does not apply to portal. If you're using a portal, number 3 does not apply to you. So for portal users, mainly portal 10.4 or above users, you can also host your extensions behind the web adapter. So here I provide like a typical location where you will store your extensions. So that's your portal install folder. Then there's a subdirectory called apps, and underneath there's a dashboard and then an extensions folder. So that's where you want to put your extensions if you're planning to put them behind the web adapter of your portal. Okay, so once you put those extensions on the web adapter, then you can access the extensions through that URL example that I show on the slide here. So now the extension is hosted on the web server, whether it's an external server or portal. Next step is you register that as an item in the ArcGIS organization, and this is typically done by the ArcGIS org admin. So yeah, I've covered the first point that it has to be done by admin, cannot be done by people with other privileges, like a publisher or like a level 1 user. So what the admin will do is that guy will reference the extensions URL, and then the org is going to create an item for that extension. So just like any other item, the admin will share that extension item with the rest of the organization. And then the person who created the dashboard or the operation view will bring in the extension with all the built-in components, package it, and then share it with the end users. Okay, and I've covered step 3 here. Okay, so now let me do a quick demo about how to deploy extension or register the extension in your org. Okay, so now let's say I'm at the point that my extensions, all the extensions I need, they are already in my company's web server. So like I mentioned, I want to make sure that these extensions are anonymously accessible, meaning I don't have to sign in with a username password, I can just access it. Secondly, I want to make sure that my server supports HTTPS, so let's try that. So okay, that's good. I can access my extensions through HTTP or HTTPS. To make it more safe, I'm going to continue my workflow with the HTTPS URL. So there's a table widget, and that's the same one as the one that Vani showed us in her demos. So in order to register that extension, I'm going to go into the URL to the manifest of that extension. I take that URL, I copy that. So now, it also happens that I'm the ArcGIS org admin as well as the web server admin. So now I've signed into my organization as an administrator. So under my content, I'm going to do an add item and then pick an application. So here you will see an option that I can create an operations dashboard extension. And once again, if I'm not an admin, I will not see this option at all. So let me pick this one. And then I'm going to throw in the manifest URL. So I'm just going to paste what I just copied. And then it's going to actually go into the JSON and then try to read the data. For example, it will grab the title from the JSON, and then it will populate it here. And also for the red text that you see at the bottom of the dialog, it actually also comes from the manifest. So from the manifest, it knows that the extension is going to use the data from your operation view. So it's going to show you a little message here that says, hey, this extension will use the data. Is that okay? So if everything's fine, I'm going to just give it a tag and then do add item. Oops. Okay, let's give it a different name. Demo. Okay, so just like a web map item or just like operation view item, this is an Ops dashboard extension item. So next step is I'm going to share it with the people that will be using this extension. So it can be a certain group of the org, can be the whole org. So once I finish sharing this extension item, then let me show you the screenshot. And then let me come back to my slide. Okay, so at the bottom of the screen, you see that I have the end user can start the Windows dashboard in their machine, and when they log into that organization, and if they have access to that extension, then that extension will show up when they try to add that widget or map tool or feature action, depending on the type of that extension. So this is the basic workflow about how you register an extension into your organization. Once again, it has to be done by an org admin. Okay, so now let's spend some time and talk about roadmap, road ahead, and what we've been working on. All right, so for those of you who have come to our island and talked to us, or maybe you already know that we are working on a second generation dashboard, so it's going to give you a new experience. So throughout this session, I've been talking about the Windows app and the browser app. So there are two flavors of operations dashboard. But something that we've been working on so far is we're trying to build a dashboard that's totally running on browser. So you will be able to author a dashboard using the app we provide on the browser. It will give you a very flexible layout, the way you want to place your widgets and other components on the dashboard itself. The layout is very flexible. It also comes with some enhancement on smart mapping support and labeling support, and it will also provide an improved charting library and additional functionality. And you might be wondering, what about the extensibility? So the second generation dashboard will be extensible at some point in the future. And if you're interested to get to know more about the second generation dashboard, please sign up for our beta program, and we would love to hear your feedback. Okay, so now let's do a final recap and talk about some key takes away from this session. So at the beginning, we've talked about operations dashboard, what the app is. So Ops dashboard is a visualization tool that you use to monitor real-time events or key performance indicators. And talking about extensibility, there are 3 extensible points: widgets, map tools, and feature actions. And we've looked at a demo for each type of extensions. So extensions are web apps that you develop using the JavaScript API and any other API that you need. And you can also use the dashboard debug tool to test and debug your extensions during the development lifecycle. An extension can work on both the Windows and the browser platform, as Vani showed us in the demos. Each extension consists of, at the minimum, a manifest file and an HTML5 file, and optionally some JavaScript and CSS files. Finally, you can use your extensions with your ArcGIS organization, ArcGIS online organization, or portal org. All right, so if you want to learn more, we have a whole bunch of resources. I encourage you to start from our tutorials and the API documentation. So we have got 3 tutorials that walk you through like how to build an extension from scratch. We have 2 for custom widgets and 1 for custom map tool. Like I mentioned, we have got a bunch of samples in our GitHub repository. So go to github.com, Esri, dashboard samples. If you want to learn more about the app, you can read the ArcGIS book. Chapter 9 is all about operations dashboard. And again, we strongly encourage you to join our beta program. And if you want to stay in touch, if you have questions or find a bug, you can email us at dashboard4arcgis@esri.com, and you can go to GeoNet and talk to us. So we have about 10 minutes, and any questions? No question. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You said the beta one doesn't have extension capability yet. Is that true?
Okay. So question is, the beta app, does it have extensibility yet? Right. So as of now, the beta app does not have extensibility yet. But this is something that will will be supported in the future in the new app, in the second generation dashboard for sure. We don't have like a timeline on when that will happen, but this is definitely something in our mind because we know there are people who want to extend the app. Yeah. Yes.
And is that going to be compatible with the first generation extensions?
Okay. So the question is the extensions?
And so the new dashboard.
Oh, the new dashboard.
Is that going to be compatible with the current extensions?
Okay. Is the new dashboard going to be compatible with the so the new app and the existing extensions, right? Actually, we are not too sure yet because we're still refining the story. But we are pretty hopeful that even though you have to make some tweaks to your existing extension, it should not be very painful because we are trying to, like for the new app, the extensibility framework, it will also be a JavaScript-based extensibility framework, just like the existing one. So the transition should be pretty easy for you. But I mean, you expect there are some changes that you need to make. Yeah, thanks.
So if I create an extension that has a reference to some other external JavaScript libraries, how does that happen? How do I get those libraries in there?
Okay, so if your extension has references to external libraries, how does it work? So you can either download the library, like if it's a charting library like D3, you can download the JS file and then package it as part of your extension, or you can just reference the CDN. Let me give you a quick example right here, back to my web server. So we have one called the scatter plot.
You can show the social media too. We have a moment.
Oh, it's not in the server. Okay, let me see. Yeah, so in this scatter plot widget, we are using actually the D3 charting library. So you can just download it and put it in the same folder. Just reference it.
So where does the include of the script go?
It will be in the HTML file.
Okay.
Without HTML.
So in the HTML file, the widget,
Yes.
you got it.
Thanks. Yes?
Is there source code available for the existing widgets?
Yes, so the source code is available. So you just need to go to our GitHub. I'm trying to make it bigger, but I think I can't. So you can go to github.com/esri/dashboard-samples, and you can find all the samples that we hosted out there. Yep. Any other questions? No? Okay, then thank you very much. Thanks.